faceoff. Shoots it deflected. Right in. Pietrangelo save rebound. Stopped by Pietrangelo. I don't believe that save. Even as Peter Stastny. He can't believe the save that Pietrangelo just made on him as Frankie Sparkman. Now that maneuver there to stop and rob Peter Stastny. He get 5 to 10 for that.
Hello and welcome to episode 58 of Tendy Talk, presented by the BLPA and the Hockey Podcast Networks. I'm your host Joe, better known as Wash Up Goalie on social media. This week I chat with fellow Hockey Podcast Network creator Neil Villapiano. Neil is a goalie from New Jersey who also hosts the Devil's State of Mind podcast. So, without further ado, let's get to the conversation with Neil. But Neil, hey, thanks for joining me on the podcast. It's good to have you on and fun to have a fellow THPN podcaster on.
Yeah, it's really nice to meet you. It's great to be here. I'm always excited to talk hockey, particularly the goaltending position. And I'm just really pumped to be here.
Yeah, so you're in New Jersey. How did you get into the great game of hockey? You know, I know at least when we were growing up, it was, well, maybe a little more New Jersey, but it wasn't the it game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for me, I was one of those kids that kind of was like a late, I don't know if you would call it like a late bloomer, somebody who kind of, as they got much older, they started getting into hockey. I would say around 2005, 2006 is when I really started watching hockey. And, being somebody who's always been a fan of, the local team, supporting the local teams, it was just very easy to be a fan of the New Jersey Devils because they were here playing at the old Continental Airlines Arena. And, just watching the sport, I fell in love with it right from the start, like a lot of people do. Just the speed, the action, the physicality, the scoring, everything like that from start to finish was just really what I loved. And I became a hockey fan almost immediately.
So you become a fan, how soon after did you start, skating?
That's a really good question. I actually didn't start skating until I was about 13. Okay. It took me a couple of years to kind of gain the confidence in myself to want to not only learn how to skate, but I wanted to play hockey.
Convinced mom and dad.
Yeah, convinced my mom and dad to spend the thousands upon thousands of dollars that every hockey player's parents have to spend when their children wants to play this sport. It's an expensive sport, but in many ways it's 100% worth it. And yeah, I had to learn how to skate first. And I remember the first time I learned how to skate, they accidentally gave me a pair of figure skates. So I learned actually how to skate first off with a pair of figure skates. And it wasn't until the last day where you had to do like an exam where I decided to use hockey skates. I didn't do that well. I ended up, unfortunately, failing the exam, whatever test they call it. And I waited around for another like couple of months. And I was in Wall, New Jersey, and they had a learn to play, learn to skate program for hockey players. So I was like, well, this is no brainer. So I learned how to skate with regular, hockey skates, and I took the test and I passed with flying colors. And that's how I learned to skate at the age of 13, going on 14.
That's awesome. It's funny you mentioned that because one of my high school teammates, we later learned that he got his start not only learning to skate in figure skates, but in figure skating. And he likes to bring out the picture and puts it on Facebook during the Olympics now that he figure skated with Johnny Weir and beat him in one of, it was like a 8-year-old figure skating competition, but cool. There's him and Johnny Weir on the podium, and he's standing, on the first, and Johnny Weir's on second. He's like, "What could have been? What could have been?"
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you start skating, and I think like a lot of goalies, we start out learning to skate and play the game, but we're just drawn to the position. What drew you to the position, and when did you get to put the pads on?
That's a really great question. I first drew to being a goaltender from watching arguably the greatest goaltender to ever play the position, and that is Marty Brodeur.
Yep.
The first thing that stood out to me was just simply that, every goaltender has a very unique mask, as we all know, and everybody's designs are cool. And that was the first thing that was drawn to me. I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like, it's so much different than any other, type of hockey player. And then you see the pads and the stick and everything, and you say, wow, this looks like a really, really cool, like, get up. What is this position? And then once I learned about the goaltending position and the job of the goaltender is to stop the puck, I said, I enjoy stopping the puck more and being the biggest reason in many ways that a team wins a game than scoring any type of goal. I really enjoy the position. So right after I learned how to skate, I immediately told my parents that I wanted to be a goaltender. And their reaction at first was not great, because when I was younger, I didn't really handle pain very well. Like, my pain tolerance wasn't great. So like, this is the funniest thing that I tell people. I am scared to get hit by a baseball, but I don't mind getting hit with a puck. I don't understand that, but even nowadays, like, it's still like a weird thing. But I learned, as I got older, I, continued to play baseball. That fear is still a little bit there, but it is what it is. I learned how to play football. That was okay. Basketball is not as physical, but I wanted to play goaltender because I wanted to be on the ice at all times. I didn't like the fact where as a forward or a defenseman, you had to sit on the bench and wait a little while, and then you're only on the ice for 30 to 45 seconds. I wanted to be involved in the game from start to finish. I wanted to play. So it was easy for me to want to become a goaltender. And the first guy, obviously, like I said, that inspired me to be a goaltender was Marty Brodeur, and he is still my biggest idol when it comes to sports.
I think we were really spoiled in that era. When you look at the goaltenders, you had Marty Brodeur, Dominic Hasek, Patrick Waugh, Eddie Belfour, Mike Richter, Kelly Rudy. I mean, you
Felix Potvin as well during that time.
Potvin, Cujo. I mean, we could go over 15 goalies, and I would argue all of them should be in the Hall of Fame. Most 100%. Of them already are. And, like you said, arguably the greatest goaltender of all time. But there's two other goalies in that conversation, and they played at the same exact time. And it's like,
it's true.
I know for me, I didn't think Brodeur was that great in those days. It's like he's lucky because he's got the trap and all of this.
Yeah, but I knew somebody was going to bring this up. People bring this up all the time.
But it's like, I was a Belfour fan, so I was a little biased. Like, Eddie's better. Fair. But as time went on and he kept playing and the game changed and he changed with it and he was still dominant. It's like, okay, yeah, he is, definitely arguably the best goaltender, and I think that's where the conversation gets really interesting. Is it the greatest goaltending career, or is it the greatest goaltender for a period of time? Because I think if we look at a period of time, I mean, Hasek's got to be the greatest goaltender, because he had about a 2-3 year run where, it was just ridiculous. How none of those Buffalo teams won a Stanley Cup is beyond me.
Those were much better times in Buffalo than there are now. That's for sure.
Could you imagine Hasek's numbers if he would have played for New Jersey during that time?
He would have been the greatest goaltender to ever play the position. Yeah. I don't think there would have been any debate whatsoever. I don't know about, I'm sure he would have won 3 Stanley Cups. Maybe they would have won another. More. Who knows? I've always said that the only knock that Marty Brodeur ever gets for, other than obviously he played with, Scott Stevens, Scott Niedermayer, Ken Danico, some of the greatest defensemen to ever play the position. And, he had goal scoring prowess with so many guys like Claude Lemieux, Alexander McGillney, Patrick Elias, Peter Sikora. The list goes on and on and on. The other knock really for Marty was simply that he didn't win the 2001 Stanley Cup final against Patrick Waugh.
Yeah.
I think if he had won that, there would be literally no debate. At least in my opinion, people would say, oh, what about Stanley Cups? And it's like, well, Marty also has more cups than Patrick Waugh.
He's got more goals than him too.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. Dominic Hasek, there's a reason why they called him the Dominator. I mean, there's a reason that they called him that. He was insanely good, and nobody could figure it out. And speaking as a Devils fan, I know what it was like in many ways to see Dominik Hasek with Buffalo. Even when he was later in his career, when he was with Detroit, he was still very, very good. And I do agree with you that if he played on the New Jersey Devils during that period of time, they would have won the same amount of Stanley Cups, maybe even more. And I think that if, you give him a couple more cups, there is much more of a definitive saying to say that Dominik Hasek was the greatest goaltender of all time.
Yep.
And you brought up a point about before for Marty, was it the greatest, was it the greatest career for a goaltender? Or was it the greatest period of time for a goaltender? I've argued that it's the greatest career for a goaltender because it's not just the stats. The other thing is that he played the position in a way where the NHL had to change the rules of the game. The whole thing where the goaltender can't play the puck behind his net or like right to the side of his net. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
You can't do that. I mean, it just happened when the Devils took on the Bruins this past weekend. Jeremy Swayman got called for a penalty for delay of game because of that specific reason.
Yeah, it's the dumbest penalty.
It is the dumbest penalty, but it was because Marty Brodeur was so unbelievably gifted and talented with how he could be that third defenseman on the ice to pass the puck, set up his teammates, and create offense going the other way, that the NHL was trying to find a way to slow him down. And also he had his own goalie style. We talk about butterfly, stand up, hybrid. Really, Martin Brodeur was the one that really kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say invented, but really promoted the hybrid position where it was a mix of both butterfly and stand up, and he would stack the pads. I mean, everybody's seen some of the great saves that he's made, the scorpion saves. He just played the game as he defined it, Marty's way.
I would say him and Cujo were the true hybrid goalies of that time.
Correct.
And, I kind of alluded to the knock some people give Marty, and that's, he played on those Devils teams with the Trap. But I always argue back that good teams make their goalie look good because their goalie is so good, they get to take chances they wouldn't normally take. The Devils played different when Chris Terreri was in net, which again, there's a guy I think is one of the all-time greatest backup goalies.
Yes,
Chris Terreri.
100%. He's a Devils legend in many ways in himself, because not only was he just a solid goaltender in the early 80s, in the late 80s, early 90s, and even when he came back several other times, but he also stayed within the Devils organization. He was Marty Brodeur's goalie coach for like the last 6-7 years of his career. Like, that's how much the Devils and, really many people in the hockey world, valued a guy like Chris Terreri. So that kind of shows you he was one of the better backup goaltenders we've ever seen.
Yeah. And, he's one of those guys where he could have gone to a bottom feeder team and been a starting goalie, but he was just like, no, he knew where he fit perfectly,
Right.
Last week I had Sammy Jo Small on, and the title of her book is The Role I Played, and Chris Terreri understood the role he played, and he wasn't going to try and play a different role.
He did.
And for a guy that just wore the combo, he still had so much style. I think of him, not just with the Devils, but his short time in Chicago and San Jose. I saw a picture of him today there, and it's like he just very understated style. Not as flashy as Brodeur with his own designs on the pads.
Marty kept it pretty simple, I would say, throughout most of his career. I mean, you look at his helmet, it really never changed. Helmet. It was the same thing. The Devil's, tail around his helmet. That was the same his entire career. Even when he had that short time at St. Louis, it was relatively the same thing, except he changed it to blues colors because that was just who he was. Terreri had, from a design standpoint, he had a little bit more style than Marty did, 100%.
Yeah. One thing I appreciated about Brodeur was the fact that he kept that design. And, we've seen so much change in mask art where they put all these little things, and you got to be this close to it to really see what's going on. But Brodeur was part of that 90s style where you could see what was going on from the stands.
Right.
As time went on, he still had those cool little Easter eggs, or if you had it up close, you could see it, but he still had that classic design. I think, he was able to keep that balance. Yeah.
And towards the end of his career, that a lot of people don't realize is that he would have little Easter eggs, like he had his kids on the back of his on
Yeah.
the back pad of his mask with his dogs, and also his father when he passed away in 2014, where he would kiss it prior to starting any game because, you know, he didn't get a chance to see his
Yeah.
kids or spend a lot of time with his family while he was playing. So that was those were kind of cool things. My favorite design that Marty ever did, which again, he didn't do very much, was that when the Devils played in the Stadium Series game at Yankee Stadium in 2014 against the Rangers, he obviously had a helmet that was the same design, except it was red, green, and white, which almost looked like glow in the dark. And to me, that was like so cool. It was so simple, but it was so cool. And it was so Marty. And that's what I loved about it.
Yeah. I think he should have sported that 70s porn mustache that he came into the league with a little bit more.
Yeah, he was definitely rocking that stash, that's for sure.
Yeah.
He was a fan of Movember 100%.
Yes, exactly. So it's because of Marty, really, you could say you gravitated toward the net. How far did you go? And, you know, it sounds like you're still playing.
I actually went up until about high school. I actually am wearing my old high school jersey right here, Red Bank Regional, which is in Red Bank, New Jersey, not very far from my house. I played up until about high school because by that time I realized that I wasn't going to be able to make a career playing in the NHL. That was kind of one of my dreams. And that's why I'm doing what I do now, which is, you know, covering the Devils and, you know, broadcasting games for hockey teams. But I played in high school. I got one win. It was definitely a tough year, to say the least. But I was just happy to be able to play the position, make some saves, win a game. And that was really what it was for me. Once I accomplished all of that, I was totally like satisfied. I was like, okay, this is, you know, I achieved a lot of the things that I wanted to achieve in my time playing hockey. And in my time playing goaltender. But there's always times, even nowadays when I watch games, there's times where I miss it. Like I miss the pregame warm-ups, you know, the hours before the game where you're mentally preparing, the warm-ups before the game starts, you know, making saves, coming up with big time saves to help your team win, the camaraderie in the locker room. I miss a lot of those things. I've definitely had the urge to maybe join, you know, a men's league, maybe down the road when I get a little older, and try to upgrade my gear, because it's been about 7-8 years since the last time I used my gear, which is not adult regulation size. So I think I have to invest some of the money I get from the great people here at the Hockey Pod Network to do that. But it's definitely something that I've given a lot of thought to, and I do hope that, you know, when the time is right, that I get an opportunity to, you know, even just play for fun, because I really do miss it. I would say to many hockey fans and hockey players, especially like the young kids, you just got to try to play goalie at least once before you stop playing hockey. Play it once, even if you don't like it. Just play it once, because a lot of people, it's so incredible what happens when you strap them on and you actually play, and you realize just how involved you are in the game.
It's funny you say that, because, you know, we would have a Christmas Eve skate in high school, and it was just a fun shoot around. And then we would have, you know, a few scrimmages after our season was over. And I always skated out, and I picked the kid that was always, you know, yelling at the goalies saying, you should have had that. It's like, you're wearing the pads today. And after that, it was night and day. They're like, whoa, this is not easy.
It's not for everybody. I would say that I would say this, and this is a very stereotypical thing for goaltenders, but you got to be a little bit nuts to want to play that position. You have to be a little bit crazy, because again, you're having frozen rubber pucks being shot at you. And especially as you get older and the players get better and they get stronger, that puck's coming in faster and faster and harder. And you have to be mentally and physically prepared every single time to make those saves. Even though, and especially when, you know, in many ways you're putting yourself in very much harm's way.
Well, and there's times where you're out there and, you know, that guy with the puck on his stick, he's got a hard shot. And I mean, I've talked to other guys about it. We all know what the difference between a hard shot and a fast shot is.
Right.
You just see that guy with the hard shot.
I know the difference.
Like,
I have a freaking
hurt.
stain from a hard shot right here that I haven't washed off. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Right near my heart, which obviously gave me a little scared, but luckily the pads help me out a little bit.
You see those guys coming down, you're like, it's gonna hurt, and I can't flinch.
Yep. You can't flinch because either it's going to hit you in a place where you don't want it to hit you, or it's going to end up in the back of the net.
Yeah, and to me, that's worse than hitting me where I don't want it to hit me. So, I recommend getting back into the game and playing beer league hockey. It's really different for me. I played up into college. It was Division III JV, but still it was competitive hockey. But
right.
As you said, we had that, get into the game early. And what I loved about college is, the rink's on campus. We're the only ones using it. So instead of showing up an hour before the game and getting a key for the locker room from the rink attendant, it was show up whenever we wanted for a game.
Right.
So it was not uncommon for me to be at the rink 2.5, 3 hours before a game. And I'm at my stall getting it, and our rec center was connected to the rink. So, you would usually go, maybe ride the bike, run a few laps. And it's just kind of starting to get loose and get into that mindset. And, maybe not have the headphones connected to the Discman going, but starting to talk with the guys, retape the stick, even if it doesn't need it. Those little things, just getting in that mindset.
We're all creatures of habit. Hockey players are creatures of habit. We all try to find things that not only maybe give us a little bit of, maybe an edge in the game, or, something that could be lucky, because there's nothing wrong with a little bit of luck, but also things to calm down the nerves. I've always said that, a lot of time as a goaltender, you have a lot of nerves because, pucks are going to be coming at you. Guys are going to be crashing the net, trying to make plays. I mean, you think Mackenzie Blackwood on Sunday against the Rangers, was trying to mentally prepare that he could get an elbow to the face? Probably. Because that's just what it is. That's the time. That's, you knew the job was dangerous when you took it. That's the reality of it. So you have to find ways to calm those nerves, settle yourself in mentally, emotionally, physically, prepare yourself for however the game's going to go. And sometimes it could be a very quiet game where you see 10, 15 shots and nothing really is coming at you. Or you have a game where you got to face 50 some odd shots and you have to make every single one of those just to keep your team in the game. Every game is different. Hockey is a magical, unpredictable sport, as I say all the time. You don't know what's going to happen. And as a goaltender, you have to be prepared for everything. So, I can totally understand the whole idea of preparing even several hours beforehand, just sitting there. I mean, when I was in high school, I would be mentally preparing myself in the middle of class. Like and we're talking 4, 5, 6 hours before puck drop. And I'm sitting there in class thinking about, what I'm going to do in the game. And that's probably why my grades weren't so good, but it was that type of stuff, you're mentally preparing for it every game.
Well, like in high school, I never drove to a game. Always made my mom and dad drive. My dad's like, you got your license. Why can't you drive to the game so we don't have to get there an hour before? It's like, no, I sit in the back seat with my headphones on and just, he's like, this is ridiculous. And even now playing beer league hockey, I still get to the rink an hour before the game.
Yeah.
My teammates don't show up until the Zamboni's on the ice, but I'm in that locker room getting ready. One really nice thing about beer league hockey though, is there's usually beer in the locker room before the game. And I have found just one pregame beer. Really calms the nerves.
Loosens the body, that's for sure.
It does. It's the darndest thing. It's like, I think I was just kind of in a funk about 2-3 years ago. And so I just cracked open, because I wasn't drinking before the game at that point. And I cracked one open and went out and I had a game. So now it's like, well, okay, that worked. It calmed me down. And darndest thing. And then of course
I'm more of a wine drinker myself. That definitely calms my nerves. So I mean, it all depends on it's just one of the many things about getting yourself to, relax, not only physically, but mentally, and preparing yourself for what's to come.
You might have opened up a whole new, I guess you could say, fancier side of adult hockey. Instead of the beer leagues, the wine leagues. I
mean, my family and I make wine in our basement every single year. We've been doing it for over 100 years. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I started a new trend. I would recommend it to a lot of people. It not only calms your nerves, it helps you lower your blood sugar numbers, which is good as well, especially if you're a diabetic. So it's definitely something that I would recommend.
Yeah. It's cool that you guys make wine, because I make beer. I'm a home brewer. Now, Grant, I haven't made beer in quite a while because I started making beer because I like to try different beers.
Right.
And then we had some great bottle shops open up in the area. I'm like, well, I can have 5 gallons of a beer I don't know if I'm going to like or if it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
Or I can run up to the bottle shop and buy a 6-pack of 6 different beers.
There you go.
We'll see how that one goes. So,
right.
But I do enjoy the process of brewing the beer, and the kids help every once in a while, which is kind of fun, even though they can't have any. So I know you got to watch party deal going on tonight. So I want to be
I'm doing was it Rangers versus Canadians tonight? So that should be Caden Primo's getting his first start of the season. So that'll be interesting to see how the Canadians play in front of him. Yeah,
that'll be fun to see. But I alluded to early on, you've got your own podcast.
Yeah.
Where did the idea for the podcast come from, and why did you start it? I think when we talk to other podcasters, it's like goaltending. There's something that drove us to do it. What drove you to, just turn the mic on and start talking?
That is a really, really good question, because there's a lot that goes into it. It starts with just simply that since the time I was about 15, I knew what I wanted to be, career-wise. I wanted to be a sports broadcaster, and that was just in every sport. And so for many years, I honed my craft. I got my certification at Hofstra University. I had my own television show for 3 years down in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And I've done a bunch of other stuff. I've written a couple books. I've done YouTube videos. Everything like that. Podcasting wasn't something I had done. I knew about it, but I had never thought about doing it that much until I jumped on a friend's and did a couple episodes with him and said, "Oh, this is kind of fun. This seems like something that I could potentially do." And one day I was just on Twitter, and I was interacting with the Soda Pod, which covers the Minnesota Wild, and also, great place to learn about all the big time breweries you can think of. It's a wonderful podcast.
It's funny you mentioned that podcast. Joey Netto on that podcast. His dad was my college goalie coach, and Joey used to sweep up the rink during our summer hockey camp. So I've known him for quite some time.
That's awesome. So I interact with them a bunch, and Isha, who's one of the guys that runs the network and also one of the guys on that podcast, he said to me, "Hey, do you want to come on for an episode and talk some hockey?" I said, "Absolutely." So I went on there for like an hour or so. And then afterwards, Isha goes, "Man, we really love your energy. By any chance, because you're a Jersey guy, you're a New Jersey Devils fan, we're actually looking for a new Devils podcast host. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Absolutely. I would love to do that." And so he kind of worked me through it. I started the Devil State of Mind podcast in June of 2020, and it's been growing ever since. And I love it because I get to live the dream at just 24 years of age. I get to talk about my favorite team. I get to talk about the sport that I love. And I have a lot of people that enjoy hearing what I have to say. And it's definitely something that I don't take for granted at all. And that I realize just how lucky I am. And Devil State of Mind, just the name, you're just trying to figure out a name that sounds good. It makes sense. It involves the Devils.
Yep.
And, obviously I'm from New Jersey, but we're in the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area. And we know the song New York State of Mind.
Yep.
And I said, wait a minute, how about Devil State of Mind?
Yeah,
and
I like it.
And we looked it up. Isha and myself looked it up to see if there was another podcast out there like that. They said, nope. And I said, all right, we got a winner. So Devil State of Mind was the podcast name that I chose. I love it. And like I said, I'm just really happy that I get to talk about the New Jersey Devils and, have a podcast and do all the things that I do. It's been absolutely phenomenal since I joined the network.
Yeah, I started my podcast right around the same time as you, and it's fun just talking to a bunch of different people about the game we love, and for me, the position we love.
Right.
It's I don't know. I find it fun, and apparently other people do too. I joked when I first started. I think it was when I had Ron Tugnut on. I said, don't worry. there's only tens of people listening. Well, that's not true anymore.
No, I mean, the way the network has done such a phenomenal job of growing, and we have also Amaze Labs as well to thank, for continuing to help us grow as a network. And really, it's one of those things where every time I am about to submit a new episode, I always look at, how previous episodes have done and things like that. And I'm always blown away by the amount of people that not only want to listen to my podcast, but listen to everybody. And the amount of growth that we've had as a network has been absolutely 100% phenomenal. And it's great that we all have people that just want to take time out of the day to listen, watch, however they, get their podcasts, and just hear and see what we have to say. And I think that's the stuff that keeps people like you and I motivated every week to, share our stories, interview people. I mean, I've had, both Jonas Hiller and Eddie Lack on my podcast, which is phenomenal because I watched those guys play in the NHL.
Yeah.
And I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would have the opportunity to interview them. Now, I'm still working on Marty Brodeur. He's a lot harder to get. But I ask people all the time, if anybody's got a connection of some sort or anybody, I would love it because he would be somebody that I would absolutely be over the moon about if I had the chance to interview. But like I said, this whole process and everything that's gone on with the Devil State of Mind podcast and the Hockey Pod Network has been 100% a blessing to me.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree with everything you're saying. It's been the same for me. My Marty Brodeur was Eddie Belfour. I was lucky enough to get him on. And him and his son came on. It was fun because Dane and I played for the same youth association. So we were able to share some stories about the old rink. And I think that caught Eddie by surprise a little bit and allowed him to open up a little bit more, which was really fun. And they sent me some whiskey afterwards, which was great.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
No, but yeah, I agree. I think talking goaltending with Marty Brodeur and just how equipment changed over his career would be amazing. Yeah. One of the people I'm trying to get on my podcast is actually the Devils goalie coach because he was one of my old teammates.
Really?
Yeah. Him and I were down at St. Mary's at the same time, Dave Rogalski, and super nice kid, quiet kid. So that I'm not surprised it's hard to get a hold of him and track him down. I have his contact information, but he's just kind of, like do my own thing, so yeah.
He's also helping Mackenzie Blackwood and Bernier help us win some important games this year. That's for sure.
Yeah. But I got to get him on because I had one of my other college goalie teammates on, and he talked about how Dave not only ended his high school career in the state tournament, but ended his college career when he came to state. So it's like, all right, now I need to get Dave's side of the story.
You got to do that.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, I want to get him on. So I don't know how much you've listened to my podcast, but I like to end everyone with a list of 10 rapid fire questions.
Sure.
And they're the same questions I've asked every single guest, which I think is the fun part about it. So
awesome.
First one is, what's the craziest coaching moment from your playing days?
Oh my goodness. The craziest coaching moment was actually my dad being the head coach during the spring season. And it was before one of our games. He comes in and he told me ahead of time that he was going to come into the locker room and flip out in front of the whole team to get us going emotionally. So he comes in and he starts yelling at everybody saying like, do you guys have any pride? Do you guys have this, that, and the other thing? And, I keep a straight face, but in the back of my mind, I'm kind of laughing because I knew ahead of time that this was coming.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wanted to look around to see how people would react to hearing my father, be that way. Cause I'm used to it. He's been my coach since I was a kid. But that was probably the best and funniest and craziest coaching story. And we had a really competitive game. We lost 3-2. We actually lost 4-2 with an empty netter. But it was really one of our most competitive games that we had. And we wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for my dad getting us emotionally energized to play that game.
That's funny. I was expecting something good since you're from New Jersey, maybe a table flip in there, but it's funny you mentioned, we lost 3-2, actually 4-3 because of the empty net. this weekend, our beer league game, I say we lost 4-3, but there was an empty net goal. But they're shooting it down. I'm looking at my teammates.
Goalies never count the empty
Yeah.
netter on. It doesn't matter to them.
I'm looking at my teammates, so I'm going, that one doesn't count. Nope, doesn't count.
Nope. That counts on your plus minus, not mine.
Yeah, it doesn't count against my goals against. That's for sure.
Nope.
So what's your favorite all-time goalie mask?
My favorite oh wow, you really put me on the spot here. My favorite, well, I said one of them actually before, and that was the Marty Brodeur Stadium Series mask.
Yeah.
But the other one that I absolutely loved, 100% loved, was Scott Clemenson when he had the Spider-Man mask back when he was playing with the Devils. And he actually still works with the Devils as part of a goaltending department. Like the Devils have their own department led by Clemenson and Brodeur. That's just basically on goalies. He had a Spider-Man mask, which was absolutely 100% awesome. And also, for the most part, any mask that Henrik Lundqvist had, because all of them were just phenomenal. No matter which one he had, they were all great. So those are some of my favorites.
Good answers. I remember that Clemenson mask. That was a cool one. So what's your favorite rink that you've played at?
Favorite rink that I've ever played at? I would have to say probably the Red Bank Armory, which is not very far from my house. It was actually converted from an old, I believe it was a fire department, an old firehouse. It was converted from a firehouse to a hockey rink. And, I had the chance to play there a lot. And it's just really cool because it's all brick. It feels very old school. It's hosted a lot of really pretty impressive events that even the Devils have hosted. It's a very well-known rink within the entire New Jersey state. And the biggest reason I like it is that you have this old school type of feeling with old, there's no really seats. It's where, you kind of have to like stand on both sides. It's kind of like in a U shape, and it's, it stands and everything. It's a really, really cool place to play some hockey. That
sounds pretty cool. I'm going to have to look it up. So what's your favorite stick that you ever used?
Oh, that's tough. My favorite stick was an old Sherwood stick. I think it was kind of like the same style that Marty had for a while there. Actually, towards like when he was in his like later in his career, he had like a very old, it was like an old / new version of Sherwood. I don't know why I gravitated so much to it, but for some reason it was the one that felt the best in my hand, like the one I felt the most control, and it wasn't too heavy. It was kind of like in a way where I could really, skate back and forth and be productive with the stick. So that was the stick that I used. I don't remember the name of it exactly, but I remember it had the dots on the back, but it had Sherwood on the front. Very old school type of thing. I'm an old school type guy. Yeah. So that kind of, that was the one that I used and that I like the most.
Yeah, I know what one you're talking about too. And I'm old school too. So when I got the new equipment, I had to go with the old school graphic.
There you go.
It's funny, when I was ordering the equipment, it's like I could go with the new graphics, no problem, and come up with something cool. But I was like, it's going to look outdated at some point. And it's like, so it's like, well, the set I was replacing was 21 years old. Let's see if I can get the same graphic, because I'll just look cool regardless. And got it done, and it looks cool. So what's your favorite youth hockey memory?
Favorite youth hockey memory? I would say when I actually learned how to play the position. I have to give a lot of credit to a goaltending coach by the name of Chris Canale, who's actually the general manager of the Philadelphia Revolution, which is a junior hockey team. He was a goalie coach. He actually was the goalie coach for the New Jersey Titans, or the Trenton Titans, back in the day when they played in the ECHL. He was the guy that, he taught me how to play the position. He knew that I was a guy that, at 14, almost 15 years old, is trying to learn how to play the toughest position in hockey, and arguably one of the toughest positions in all of sports. And he did everything he possibly could. And in 2 days, because we had a 2-day camp where for 2 days you're in brick, and then 2 days after that you're playing in an outdoor rink in Toms River. And interestingly enough, Trevor Van Riemsdyk, who was still in high school at the time, going into college, was actually one of the I guess you'd say, local celebrities that was a part of that camp. So for 4 days, I started from not knowing how to play the position to knowing how to play the position and looking half decent doing it.
Yeah.
And I give all the credit to Chris Canale, because he was the one that, turned me into a legit goaltender. And I have the utmost respect for him. I actually had him on a podcast episode last year. He's a phenomenal guy, really, really smart about the position. Definitely somebody I would recommend if anybody needs to learn how to play the position. He knows what it takes, from the mental aspect to the emotional to the physical. He knows what it takes. And he was the biggest reason that I was able to become a decent goaltender.
So cool that you mentioned, when coaching goalies, it's not just the technical side, it's the mental and the emotional side of it, because I've had some really good goalies when I coached, and they were head cases.
Yeah.
There were other terms we used for them, but we can't use them anymore. So,
Nope.
but yeah,
Well,
they were head cases.
PG.
You couldn't count on them. And then there were the other ones that were mentally strong. Okay, technically, it's like, I'm going to put that kid in the net over the other one for the big game because I can count on him.
I mean, you could teach the physical side of the sport.
Yep.
As far as the mental side, there's only so much you can do as a coach. At some point, the individual has to make the decision in their own mind and in their own emotions that this is what they want to do and that they need to be as sharp as possible. And you need to have a balance. You need to have a balance of all three. If you can have a balance of all three, you're going to have success. You're going to get better. You're going to be able to do the things that a goaltender needs to do to win hockey games.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the emotional side of it, because one of the things that plays into is that drive, that competitive fire that you have before a game. And when I was coaching, one of the other guys I coached with, he played in the ECHL during the lockout year against NHL players and everything. And, we're getting ready to face off against, our team's arch rival. And there were kids, we had to get them fired up for the game. Yeah. And we're looking at each other like, what's going on? Like, nobody ever had to tell me to get fired up for a game. Right. As soon as I walked in the rink, we could be playing, St. Mary's School of the Blind, and I'm going to be fired up for the game.
Right.
And here we are about to face off in Minnesota high school hockey against our arch rivals, the White Bear Lake Bears, in their barn, which was a packed Aldrich arena. And we got to tell some of these kids, like, hey, like,
it's a big deal.
Like, it was just foreign to us, right? Kids these days.
It's tougher. It's tougher now. It really is tougher to get kids motivated in many different ways because of all different things, social media, just different things, and it's hard, but over time, just like with anything else, over time, I feel that coaches will be able to figure out what makes these guys tick and how to really, kind of poke the bear, so to speak, to get people motivated. And I mean, if you have to motivate your team every single time to get ready for games, regardless of where they're playing, sometimes it's not necessarily you, it's just the kids themselves that's who they are. But if you're able to figure it out and figure out what makes them tick, then you have a lot going for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's why I think we've seen guys like Mike Babcock go the way of the dodo. It's,
that type of coach, unfortunately, in the NHL is kind of not as, I guess you'd say, accepting as they were before.
Yeah.
I mean, Lindy Ruff in many ways, he was like that, but you could see that he's changed a lot.
Yeah.
Because he understands that the game has changed. There's guys that, look at John Tortorella. There's a reason that he doesn't have a job right now. The way that he coaches teams is just not the way that players operate anymore. Yeah. It's just, they do need a kick in the rear end every now and then. There's no question, but it doesn't always work and it doesn't always produce what you want it to produce. There's always time for these things, but just the way that the players are, as human beings nowadays, it's just not what it used to be.
Yep, absolutely. So the next question, what's the best chirp you've heard on the ice, off the ice, in the locker room, directed at you, not directed at you?
This is a great one, because the story goes is that We were playing a team that had a goaltender that had to leave early from the game because he was going to some, camp or whatever. So my dad, who was the coach of our team at the time, he said, well, we have 2 goaltenders. I'll give you one of them. And he gave me to the other team. So I'm playing against my own team as the goaltender for the other team. And funny thing enough, we end up winning the game. Not my the team that I played for, we won the game. We beat my high school. And it was like the funniest thing in the world because I go into my opponent's locker room and they're all giving me high fives. I felt, I was like, that was my David Ayers moment, so to speak. I mean, it was like everybody's excited. They gave me the puck, which I still have for my first win. And that's the funny thing. That was my first win as a goaltender, and it wasn't even for my own team. That was the thing that was like the funniest thing about it. And then I go into my own locker room to get changed, and everybody's in there like all pissed off, and they're all like, why couldn't you do that for us? Why did you have to all of a sudden be really good for this? And I kind of rebutted back. I said, well, if you actually blocked the shot every now and then, maybe we'd actually win some games. And that kind of ended the whole thing because they knew that I was right in that situation. But that was kind of the funniest type of situation that led to some chirping. It was just very, very funny.
Yep. I remember. I don't even remember who we were playing, but we had a similar situation where the other team needed a goalie. So we gave him one, and my buddy, Donnie Merkel, he wound up beating us. And we're like, Donnie, you couldn't let 1 or 2 in. And he's just kind of smirking in the corner. We're like, no,
not going to happen.
He's like, not against you guys. So you may not have an answer for this, because the question is, what's the worst post-game beer you've had? But you haven't played in a while. So what's the worst drink post-game that you've had?
Oh, that's, there's a lot of situations where when it comes to beer, I've never really been picky. A lot of the stuff that I've had is usually good. The worst thing that I think I've ever had post-game was a Sam Adams Oktoberfest. And that's the thing. I like Sam Adams Oktoberfest, but I guess this particular time, my stomach just didn't cooperate with me because for some reason, the second that I had it, I just felt horrible. I felt right from the start, and it gave me the biggest headache for hours afterwards. And I woke up the next morning, I'm like, there was no way that I got drunk because I felt like I was hungover, even though I was like, this is ridiculous. And I was just like, well, I'm not having this. So I actually haven't had an Oktoberfest in a long time. And that's probably why, but that would be probably the worst one I've ever had post game.
It's funny you say that. And I could probably debate this with the Soda Pod guys. I like craft beer. I like a lot of different styles of beer, and Oktoberfest is one of them. But I will argue anybody that a good cheap beer like a Coors Light, even Busch Light was good Sunday night, but that is the perfect post-game beer because it's light, it's refreshing, it's darn near water to begin with. You get 1 or 2 of them, and then you go to the nicer craft beers.
Right.
But that first one, right when you get in the locker room and it's cold, it goes down nice and refreshing.
I think refreshing is the big thing there.
Yeah. I think a good Pilsner, a lager, even a Golden Ale, that's kind of the ideal post-game beer.
Right.
And like I said, and then when you get to the parking lot, then you go into the craft.
Right. Then you drink the nicer stuff. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So when you tape your stick, do you go heel to toe or toe to heel?
What did I do? I'm just it's funny to just bring back these memories. I went heel to toe. That was the way that I did it. I did both. And it's funny for me, I actually changed it every game. I never did the same thing more than once. So if I did heel toe one game, I did toe heel the next game. It was just kind of, I don't know. It was just kind of a routine that I created for myself that actually was kind of what made me feel comfortable. I was a big fan. I was a big fan of the Billy Smith, tub at the top where it's just really, really big. I don't know why. It was never about because I was going to go spear somebody during the game, but it was having that secure, feeling when you have it at the top of your stick was kind of like what I like. So I like the Billy Smith look. So, because that's when I was a kid, I was like kind of looking up like stick styles, which one made the most amount of sense to me. And Billy Smith's style was probably the one that I used the most.
Yeah, no, I remember that one. So what is your favorite number to wear and why?
Well, it's the one that I'm wearing right now, and that's 30. And it's mainly because of Marty Brodeur. And also because of Henrik Lundqvist. Like the thing about it is that the two goaltenders from the era that I watched, because I wasn't enough to really remember the times of Dominic Hasek, Eddie Balfour, Patrick Waugh. Once I started watching hockey, it was, Marty Brodeur, it was, Henrik Lundqvist, it was Tuukka Rask, it was Carey Price, Roberto Luongo. But it was just watching the way, watching those guys and seeing how, both Marty and Henrik Lundqvist wore the same number, 30. It was just easy for me to pick a number, and that was the number that I chose.
Yep, it's a good number. I started out with 30 because of Eddie Balfour.
Fair enough.
Then when I got to high school, I changed it to 35 for different reasons. And I always liked it because it kind of reminded me of Richter too.
Oh, there you go.
And I was a big Mike Richter fan because of the 98 World Cup.
There you go.
That some of the best goaltending I've ever watched. Awesome. There was a really good documentary on NHL Network a couple weeks ago about that. And it was just fun to watch about the.
Yeah, I think they had what about the 94 team?
The 94.
I've actually watched that one. It's a really good one. I would like them to do more styles like that if they can with other teams, just because I feel like that type of style is more exciting for viewers. That's the way that I look at it.
Yeah. So last question, what advice do you have for young goalies?
I would say, honestly, find what makes you tick. That's the biggest thing that I would say to people. It's just, when you look at yourself as a goaltender and you want to say, okay, what type of goaltender I want to be? Not only should you watch a lot of goaltenders, but also when you play, just try different things, especially if you're like really young. If you're like 7, 8 years old, you have no pressure. Just go out there and do different things. See what makes sense. See what feels comfortable for you. Try on different things. Learn about not only yourself as a hockey player, but learn about yourself as a person, because you learn a lot about yourself as a person as well when you play this sport, because you do have to have a lot of confidence. You do have to have a lot of courage, and you do have to be, a little bit wired differently to play this sport. And I would say that. And also, it's going to sound very cliche, but it's so true. Practice does really make perfect in many ways. The more you practice, whether it's at home or whatever case may be, do it. For me, when I was learning how to play, Chris Canale, he gave me a drill that I did at home where I would put on my pads, I have my skate, I have my glove, and I would put on a timer in my kitchen, and I would have to stay in the same position, the same, firm position that I would be in, when I'm ready to stop a puck for 5 minutes straight. I did that every single day because that helps my body and my mind prepare for that type of position and to be comfortable with it physically and also be comfortable with it mentally. So those are some of the things that I would recommend to young players. And also just have fun. It's one of the funnest positions in all of sports. I mean, you're stopping a puck. You are the biggest reason that a team wins a game. And in many ways, you can be also the biggest reason a team loses a game. So really, in many ways, the puck, not the ball's in your corner, but the puck is in your corner because you are controlling the game. And it's a lot of fun. And if you're just having fun out there, it doesn't matter how many goals you give up, because you're gonna enjoy yourself. You're gonna make some saves. And when you win and when you make some saves, it's a great feeling.
Well, and I'd argue too that the goalie is almost the emotional leader of the team. If you're having fun, even if you're losing, your team's probably going to have fun too.
Very true. Very true.
So where can folks follow you on social media, Neil?
Yeah, you can follow the Devil State of Mind podcast at Devil State on Twitter, on Instagram at Devil State of Mind, and also like us on Facebook. We post new episodes every Monday and Thursday talking all things New Jersey Devils. And you can follow me on my personal Twitter at THENVPSHOW and my personal Instagram at NVPQB11.
That's a lot of letters.
It is. I perfected it after a while.
We will put links to all of those in the show notes to make it easy on people, especially if they're driving, trying to remember all of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So I know you got to run, so I don't want to take up much of your time, but thanks for hopping on the podcast, talking some goaltending and Devils hockey.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me on. Big fan of the podcast. I'm excited that you brought me on, and we'll definitely continue to stay in touch and continue to talk about the wonderful sport that is hockey and the great position that is the goaltender.
It was fun getting to know Neil and hearing about his hockey background. Discussing the merits of Marty Brodeur and Chris Terreri wasn't bad either. I think we could have done a whole episode just talking 90s era goalies. Who knows? Maybe we will in the future. Be sure to follow Neil on social media. He's at THENVP Show on Twitter and NVPQB11 on Instagram. Be sure to follow The Devil's State of Mind on social media simply by searching for The Devil's State of Mind. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube simply by searching for Wash Up Goalie, and I'll pop up. Visit washupgoalie.com for some great hockey-related content, my beer league hockey video highlights, and of course, all podcast episodes. I even dropped a 2021 holiday shopping guide for those interested. If you want some Wash Up Goalie or Tendy Talk apparel, be sure to visit my Threadless shop by clicking the merchandise link on my website. If you like this podcast, go listen to the BLPA Big Show. It's the OG BLPA Podcast Network show where a couple of beer league players talk beer league hockey, draft experience shenanigans, and exploits from around the game. Be sure to check out the full lineup of hockey-related podcasts on the Hockey Podcast Network as well. There are too many shows to list here, but shows like the Quack Report podcast, the Tell It Abs It Is podcast, and the King's Den podcast can all be found. I need to thank the band The Zambonis for allowing me to use their music on my podcast. You can download their music on iTunes or listen wherever you stream music from. As always, I'm working on lining up other goalies to talk to for future episodes. If you are a goalie or have connections to a goalie who I should talk to, shoot me an email at washupgoalie39@gmail.com or shoot me a DM on social media. Let's not forget, if you're a brand who wants to sponsor the show, be sure to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk. And finally, if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, and comment on the podcast platform you're listening on. It's a quick action on your part that helps others find Tendy Talk. So, until next time, keep your stick on the ice and your body square to the puck.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please rise for the Zamboni! For the Zambonis.